Creating and selecting magic items for characters is an important part of our game prep, and it can also get pretty complicated. But today I'm going to offer a lazy approach for building interesting and unique magic items. This process breaks down into 4 pieces: the condition of the item, the origin of the item, the type of item, and any special power that this item has. So first, we think about the condition of the item. We can actually create a short list of different kinds of conditions. Is it made of glass? Is it made of obsidian? Is it glyphed? Is it rusted? Is it scarred? Does it have strange writing on it? What's the condition that we find this item in? You can write up your own list of conditions, or you can get a list of conditions in my book, The Lazy DM's Workbook. The next step is choosing an origin. Who made this thing? Is it elven, dwarven? Was it built by an ancient race of humanoids? Is it built from the plane of shadow? Did demons create it? We can come up with a whole list of different origins. I also have a list of origins in the Lazy DM's Workbook, but the Dungeon Master's Guide also has a list of origins available on page 142. If you're building your own campaign world, you can actually create factions from your campaign that might have created this. It's a good way of injecting some of the history of your campaign world into the items the actual characters are picking up. This is a great way of exposing the larger story of a campaign world to characters in objects that the players really care about. Now, the next step is figuring out what kind of item it is. Often it's going to be like a magic item, like a magic sword or a magic bow or a shield or a suit of armor or something like that. And you can actually select those types of items based on the kinds of items that would be useful to the character. It was no coincidence that Bilbo Baggins found Sting inside of that troll's treasure hoard. Sometimes you might want it to be a mundane magic item. The Lazy DM's Workbook has a whole list of different items that might be magical, but you can also use the trinkets table from page 160 of the Player's Handbook. You take any one of these trinkets, you assign it a condition and an origin, and you have yourself a really interesting and unique item. Now, the last step for making an interesting magic item is to give it an actual power. For a magic weapon or a suit of armor, a +1 bonus is always good, but it's always interesting to give it another power as well, some kind of daily use effect. My lazy trick for this is to simply apply spell effects to it. There are hundreds and hundreds of spells inside the Player's Handbook, and many characters don't have access to a lot of the spells that are in there. So you can go through all of the spells that are inside the Player's Handbook and pick one of the spells that you think would be particularly interesting for this item, and a kind of spell that you think would be interesting for the character who's most likely to pick up that item. For a permanent magic item, like a magic sword or a suit of armor, the use of that spell would be 1 time per day. It would basically reset at the next dawn. But you can also make single-use magic items, and in this case, you can make a magic item that is significantly powerful because they can only ever use it once. It might have a spell effect that's significantly higher than what any of the characters can cast, but they can only do it 1 time, so once they've used it, it's all used up. One interesting way to do this is to look for spells that characters themselves don't often use or don't often cast. If they have the ability to use a spell that isn't exactly optimal, but they can use it on an item once per day, they're a lot more likely to use it. And it's a good way of taking some of those underused spells and making them available to characters by tying them to magic items. So hopefully this gave you a good lazy trick for your toolbox. Using this method, you select a condition, an origin, a type of item, and a magical effect to apply that item. And with those 4 simple steps, you can create millions of different kinds of magic items, all of which are really interesting for the characters to pick up. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, you can help me out in a few different ways. You can subscribe to the Sly Flourish newsletter. You can subscribe to my videos on YouTube. You can support me directly on Patreon, or you can pick up any of my books. Thank you very much and have a great day.